Excellent new single from Ash. That's called Jesus Says. Jamie Gordon on BFBS. It is 6 minutes past 8, almost 6 minutes past, 6 minutes past 8 everywhere, actually. And I'm delighted to say that joining us on a very high-tech piece of string from London somewhere is Bruce Dickinson. Bruce, thanks for coming in today.
Hello, sir.
Now then, 6 solo albums so far. The new one is out on Monday, The Chemical Wedding. Using the words of William Blake, the poet, why did you decide to do that?
Because when I was doing the album, I started... Well, the album originally was started life as being about alchemy. And as I was doing some research into alchemy, the words of Mr. Blake kept cropping up in terms of references and illustrations, his paintings and things like that. And so I started digging through some of his poetry, and some of it's pretty powerful stuff, and it really seemed to go very well with the music. He was really quite an apocalyptic, heavy metal little poet back there 200 years ago.
It's quite a dark album, isn't it?
It's very dark, yes. I think he had a very... old William Blake had a very sort of dark light, if that makes any sort of sense. I mean, he had a very, very long black tunnel, and there was this tiny little speck of light at the end of it, usually.
Does that mean he was a pessimist or a realist, I suppose?
He was very disappointed with the real world, or the real world as we sort of perceive it. I mean, the thing about alchemy... and the thing that attracted me about it was that, in many ways, alchemy is about existing in the real world and existing in another world at the same time. In some ways, it's what musicians do. Well, it's what artists do in general. You know, in that you can sit there having your daydream, but you know you're still munching on your jam-butty sort of thing. Blake used to take that to somewhat more of an extreme, in that he actually used to physically see visions for extended periods of time. But at the same time, he'd wander along, and the London that he knew was full of exploitation and, you know, little kids being shoved up chimneys and, you know, appalling scenes of sort of degradation and poverty. So he looked at the real world and went, this is pretty rough, you know. But his world, his other world that he used to see in his visions was more real and to him more preferable. And in many ways, I mean, metal is a bit like that. I mean, we deal in fantasies and monsters and otherworldly things, which is not such a bad thing.
Talking of monsters, you've got Arthur Brown on the album as well.
I like that link, yes.
The crazy world of Arthur Brown. Is he still barking? And how did you get him on the album?
Well, I've used this device, a telephone, and I phoned him up and I said, Arthur, bark like a dog. And he said, I can't. I said, OK, you're dyslexic. Be God. And he said, OK, I don't know about being a dog, but I do know about being God. So he does this wonderful thing called, which we refer to as the voice of God, and it's a bit like the national lottery, you know, it could be you type voice. And so I just said, would you like to read some of Mr. Blake's more apocalyptic verse on the record? I mean, it seemed appropriate for me to ask Arthur, because he's a sort of a chum of mine, and he's a huge childhood influence on my singing and sort of stage presentation and things like that. So who better than the original God of Hellfire?
You've kept the same band as well since the last album, Accident of Birth. Roy Z again was producing this album. Was it important that you had that continuity from the last piece of work?
Well, when you get a great bunch of guys to work with and you've got a real creative spark going between everybody, yeah, obviously you want to continue with it. I certainly did. I mean, I worked with them 3 times now. I mean, I've worked with them on Balls to Picasso, the original album that I did after I left Maiden, and subsequently 2 other albums. So yeah, it's fair to say I do love working with the guys.
It's also out on your own record label as well, Air Raid Records.
Air Raid Records, yes. In Europe, it's on Air Raid. In America, it's on a label called CMC, and in Japan, it's on JVC. But yeah, Air Raid for Europe.
It seems to me that not only established artists, but new artists as well, are very much going towards the way of maybe setting up their own record label if they can. I mean, what's been the benefits and the advantages for you?
The advantages is that there's an awful lot less messing around in terms of going straight from the album to the posters to the artwork direct to the audience. There's one less link in the chain, because it's a bit like dealing with record companies can be a bit like a game of Chinese whispers, where you start off with one message at the beginning of the chain, and by the time it gets to the other end, it's somewhat altered, and you want to keep the original message as clear as possible, especially if you've got a great and you think exactly what the audience is really, really going to go for and enjoy. You don't want it diluted by somebody else's views who maybe don't necessarily share the same musical outlook as yourself. And that's the problem with a lot of record companies, that they deal with a lot of different kinds of music. And so you're not always going to get people that are 100% committed to one kind of music. And Air Raid, obviously that's an exception. We only have 3 people who work for us directly, and they're all committed to this kind of music.
And I guess you get to keep your hands on your own project throughout.
Well, I get to keep my hands on it, for better, for worse, richer for poorer. I mean, but that's, from my point of view, I put an awful lot of, sweat and toil into these records, and to see them disappear into the hands of a bunch of, weird accountants who don't really care about music absolutely breaks my heart, particularly when, as in the case of my last record company, they ran into financial difficulties, actually through no fault of their own, but through, somebody higher up the corporate food chain, So it is a nice thing to have your own material at least under your own control.
Okay, we'll take a break and play a track from the album.
What a good idea.
I was going to play Killing Floor.
Oh, yeah, well, we've just done a video for that.
Which I think is great. I mean, there's also, we'll talk about this a wee bit later, there's also a version of Jerusalem on here, which is great, in my opinion.
Totally different. Totally different to the, weddings and funerals type hymn.
Well, I think we might give that a spin later, but for now, this is Killing Floor. Killing Floor from the new album from Bruce Dickinson, The Chemical Wedding, and he's on the show, albeit in London, and we're out in Leafy Bucks, but here nonetheless. And we've just reminded Bruce of the last time he was with BFBS doing an interview. It was about you plugging your book at the time. That novel writing has sort of tailed off now, has it?
Well, I just haven't had time to do anything. I mean, I've been putting out pretty much a solo album every year and touring it and promoting it. And the pace has been hotting up the last 18 months because of the success of the last record. So this one's probably a shade under 12 months since the release of the last one.
So you've got a huge amount of enthusiasm for music still.
Well, yeah. In fact, I'm leaping off from where I go from here. I've got a little show on a little cable metal network that's produced by Tony Wilson. And I'm just going up to record a 2-hour show for that, and that goes out Thursday nights, So I still do all kinds of odd little things like that. The reason I say that is because obviously you were with Maiden for a long time. You've been solo for quite a while. 40 million album sales. I mean, you've been there, done it, bought the T-shirt. So what's your motivation? What keeps you going? I want to do it again. I mean,
Yeah, I like that. Do it again.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, Pavlov's dog. Oh, I like that. I think I'll have another one, Why not?
Now, you obviously have other interests apart from music. I mean, fencing, you've represented Britain fencing, haven't you not?
Just about.
Yeah.
just about by the head.
Close enough for government work, anyway.
Yeah, a couple of times, but not on a hugely... at the whatever it was, European Championships, we were national champions in my team, Hemel Hempstead, 10 years ago. I don't do anything for Great Britain now, other than sort of like buy the Mars bar or whatever it is.
And you also fly as well, which is one of my passions too.
Is it really?
You got a commercial pilot's license, haven't you?
Oh, keep quiet about that. Yes, I do. Yes, otherwise they might find out and come and take me away.
Okay, well, it is a passion of mine as well.
Is it really? Splendid.
When did you start flying?
I didn't start flying till about 5.5, 6 years ago. Funnily enough, just shortly before I left Maiden. I don't know whether that's some strange sort of Freudian, deep down psychological, I learned to fly and then I think it's probably not actually, but No, I learned to fly and just gradually got sort of sucked into the aviation vortex, you know, of it, which is actually never ending because there's so much to it, there's so much depth to it, that you just keep on continually learning about it, which is fantastic. It's a lifelong thing.
It is, yeah. You never do stop learning, do you?
Yeah.
So, let's talk about the tour. You're basically covering the globe in the next few months, I suppose.
Well, bits of it, yeah. We get as far as Warsaw to the east and, I don't know, Manchester to the west. No, maybe a Porto, actually, thinking about my geography. I think it's a bit further west. But, yeah, we're covering all of Europe and south. Actually, we may very well be playing with some of your guys down in a place called Saski Most, which is down...
Sansky Most, yeah.
Sansky Most,
in
so
Bosnia.
that's it. Yeah, Bosnia, yeah, near Banja Luka. The Princess Trust and War Child are doing a little project down there, and I'd sometimes do stuff with the Princess Trust, and I volunteered to do a concert down there, and they just called me up and said, do you want to do that concert? So beginning of October, we may very well be paying a visit down to near Banja Luka and doing a show.
That's fun.
So that'd be fun. But in the meantime, anybody that's not down in Bosnia...
It might be in Germany, yeah.
Yeah, it might be in Germany, yeah. 4th of November, we're in Hamburg, and the 6th in Munich, and the Saturday the 7th in Cologne, and the 6th, Sunday the 8th, we're in Frankfurt, and then Hanover on Tuesday the 10th. And there's still lots of Brits in Hanover. We still got a...
loads.
We can still send in a gumboot then.
Oh,
over
absolutely.
there.
Yeah. What about the UK? I mean, obviously, people in, say, Cyprus or the Falklands or Belize, you know, they might be coming back to the UK. Could they get to see you at some point?
Oh, aye, definitely. At the end of November, actually the very end of November, beginning of December, we're playing Glasgow on the 30th, Manchester on the 1st, Norwich on the 3rd, Wolverhampton on the 4th, Nottingham Rock City on the 5th, which is a Saturday night, which will be cracking. Monday the 7th is Cambridge, and Tuesday the 8th is the LA2 in London. So that'll be a good pre-Christmas bash, I should think.
So you're not exactly going to be idle in the run-up to Christmas?
No. Well, I've got to get all skinny so I can gorge myself on the unfortunate, unlucky fried buzzards. You know.
Just moving back to the album, you do say in some of this publicity here that it's your best album yet. I mean, how do you gauge that? I mean, it's just, you know, what other people tell you is what you think.
I gauge it on the reaction of my nether regions when I listen to it. And I shall say no more because the red light's staring me in the face here. But yes, all the bits I listen to all the bits that the British Board of Film Censors cut out. And if they make agreeable noises, then I think, cool, this is a rocking album. And I think that's really how you should judge things, not with your, not with your head. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on this record which is, dare I say it, quite sort of intense and complex and all those types of things, but that's not the point of it all. The point of it all is it rocks, and some of it is very beautiful as well.
Actually, what struck me is that it's very of its time. It's very 90s, I thought.
It's a very modern sounding record, although what I like about it is that the heart and soul of this record goes back to the very beginning of metal. It goes right back to like early Sabbath and stuff like that. But the sort of the muscle and fibre of it is like right now, you know, end of the century type stuff. And this is kind of where it seems to have scored a hit right across the board in terms of the press with magazines that there's a magazine over here in the UK called Terrorizer, right, that does like really, you know, fairly extreme sort of metal and very, very modern stuff, you know, and I'm on the front cover and they've given it like album of the month or something. And apparently Q are going to give it a good review as well. So I'm like, what have I done wrong? I've done something, there's something amiss here, you know, which is fantastic. I mean, I don't know whether I'm headed for some great geriatric metal-dom in the sky where I become like the Paul Weller of heavy metal. God forbid.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm having a great time, and the record completely rocks, and it's a very complete record. There's nothing overtly commercial about this record in any way at all. In fact, there's a couple of tracks that we left off it. They're perfectly respectable rock tracks, but they're a bit too twee, a bit too nice for the album. And somehow, because there's a purity to the album all the way through, it seems to have picked up a lot of sort of plaudits from people who I'm very surprised like it, you know, and maybe that's why they like it. Maybe they like it because it is completely unadulterated and there's no hint of like, oh, let's do this for commercialism's sake. Let's just make an amazing heavy metal record the way that people used to make amazing heavy metal records.
Yeah. I don't get to drop names very often, but I'm going to do it now because I'm talking to Ian Gillan tomorrow. And it was a question I was going to ask him, is that having been in the business for so long, I mean, can you see a point whereby, bearing in mind you've got kids, you've got other things in your life that you can do, is there any point where you're just going to sit down and think, right, I've done that, I'm just going to get on with the rest of it, whatever's left?
When I run out of ideas... I mean, it's as simple as that. When I run out of ideas and when I stop having, when I stop having fun, that's the time to stop doing it. And the truth of the matter is that if this is in some way in your blood, you're never ever going to get rid of it. I mean, not that I particularly want to. Whether or not I make any money out of it, whether or not I'm making a living out of doing it, is actually fairly immaterial. I'm always going to be fooling around somewhere, twiddling on something, or twiddling some knob, or pushing some button and going, can we make that louder? You know. So...
Well, Bruce, long may you fool around and long may you twiddle knobs. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on the programme. We're going to round it off. I said we'll play Jerusalem. I think we will. I mean, what do you like about this version of Jerusalem?
I try to get the as close as possible as I could to what I felt the original sense of the poem Jerusalem was about, because Blake wasn't actually a Christian, he was a pagan, which is slightly ironic.
Just a bit.
That everybody sings this hymn in church, and and that it's always done with a slightly sort of semi sort of nationalistic type fervour. It's alongside, God Save the Queen, Rule Britannia and Jerusalem and things like that. And it's actually not really what Blake wrote it about. He wrote Jerusalem as being about... he adored England, but he saw England almost in a sort of a druidic way, because the Order of Druids actually set up shop next door to where he lived a couple hundred years ago. So he's very familiar with all the Druids and their theories about the land and earth spirits and things like that. He would have been right at home with crop circles and things like that. And Blake looked at modern industrial development that was happening around the time that he was around, and was horrified by it. And he saw it as the destruction of a poetic landscape, of a beautiful kind of mythological place, which England was to him, a place of a dream place, right? And Jerusalem, for him, was a representation of that. He wasn't talking about, a city in the Holy Land. He was talking about a sort of a cathedral of spirituality that you could build literally from the land, from being in England. You could sort of somehow imbibe it from being around if you were listening.
Almost as utopia, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, a sort of spiritual utopia built in England, because England for him was so special. So that's kind of what the sense that I tried to get into the song. Hence all the mandolins and Celtic-y bits and leaping around. If I could have found a bunch of people, a bunch of Irish drummers, I'd have dragged them in the studio. But in LA it was tough.
Do you think you would have liked it?
Who?
William.
William. Oh, I don't know if I could flatter myself that much, but I think he might have gotten off on it just a little wee bit. William was a very passionate man, and he had some serious arguments with the Royal Academy of Art when they were arguing about technique versus passion, and he went a bit overboard there. He said that basically that if you didn't have passion, you didn't have squat. It didn't matter how good you were at drawing straight lines. Without passion, zero. And I tend to agree with him on that.
Excellent. Bruce, thanks very much for your time. Good luck with the album. The Chemical Wedding is out on the 14th of September, which I believe is on Monday. And look forward to the tour and give it laldy.
Yes, sir.
I would. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Bye.